Hi, everybody. It's Susan again, and this time we're looking at the upcoming full moon in Aries. That's coming on Friday, the 29th of September, for pretty much all of us. So let's see who's not getting that. Perhaps if you're in the Pacific area, that will actually be a little bit earlier, like just around midnight um, on the 28th. But let's say Friday. And nonetheless, because the moon in Aries is at 6 degrees, and of course the sun in Libra, which is opposing that, giving us a full moon, is at 6 degrees. That's pretty early in the sign for the moon, and that means it's actually going to remain there for the next day or day and a half, let's say. And so we do have this energy of the moon in Aries really, really strongly. Friday, Saturday, and I'd say into Sunday. The other aspect of this particular full moon is that the next thing that the moon will encounter will be Chiron in Aries. So later the day of the full moon, meaning Friday. I'm just going to keep saying Friday. So if it's not Friday for you, then it'll be by the time you wake up, it'll be happening. And uh, and then the next thing after that will be the Eris and North Node or Rahu conjunction. So it's a pretty fiery new full moon. So the moon in Aries is quite impulsive. It's an energy of intense individuation or individuality. Aries is in the highest manifestation of Aries. It's the spiritual warrior. Now we can see that in Eris as well. So that's something where there's a lot of energy with Eris because of that North Node, and because that's going to be pulling in the annular eclipse on the 14th, which I'm going to do a separate video for because I prefer to keep these things kind of categorized, just easier for my wee mind to figure out. But this ties in very, very much the upcoming eclipse, just 2 weeks after this full moon. So that this energy, we can consider a continuation of something or being continued into the month of October in a pretty big way. The other reason being that the ruler of this full moon, which is Mars, is opposite in the sign of Libra and conjunct the South Node. I'm going to break these things down in a minute. Opposite Chiron, and Mars is on the degree point of the annular eclipse on the 14th of October. So annular means there's a ring. So the moon blocks out the sun almost entirely. So it's not a total eclipse. It's almost an entire total eclipse. But because it's not a complete eclipse, there's a ring of light that goes around the moon, and that's called annular. Not annual. So it's got nothing to do with a yearly event. So this is something that we want to keep in mind, because the ruler of this particular full moon and so much of what we're going to be experiencing until January 2025 with the North Node going through Aries is there really importantly on the South Node in Libra. So let's break this down. So the ruler of the moon, Mars, is in what is called its detriment. Now, interestingly, the sun is also in what we call fall. So detriment is when the ruler is in the opposite sign. And so the ruler is always giving us, like, let's say, the most pure energy of the planet when it's in its own sign. We just can kind of know what's gonna happen. With the ruler in the opposite sign, it's impinged by the ruler that rules it. In this case, Venus, which is actually in a lovely sextile to Mars, so mitigating that a little bit. But the Mars in Libra doesn't do so well, and Mars in Libra Mars is all about let's get this done, let's move, let's go. This is Aries energy, right? That's this energy that is visceral, it's instinctive, it can be very inspirational, it can be very driven. And Mars is all of those things. So that's one of the reasons that Aries is like that, is because the ruler is Mars. Now, when Mars has to go to Libra, it has to think about everybody else. And Mars really isn't about everybody else. Mars is about, I want this. It's about, this is the thing that needs to be done right now. We don't want to meet by committee and figure this out. And so there's a frustration with Mars in Libra. In individual charts, that can lead to expressions of Mars that are a little bit undermining, let's call it undermining connection. It can cause what we call in English a passive aggressive behavior, which is like saying you can't really express the purity of your assertion or aggression. And so you do it in these oblique ways where you kind of make a comment a little bit sideways, or you might criticize something when it's past the point of anybody doing anything about it. And of course, Mars is about taking action, and Libra is about contemplation of fairness and justice and what is balanced and what is right from a point of view of human justice. Mars doesn't care about those things. And so we have Mars that's not in great shape, ruling this moon. And then we have the sun that also is exalted in Aries. Sun loves to be in Aries because it's all about me, 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 and what do I want, and look at me. A healthy expression of Aries has a healthy ego, a healthy sense of self, because Aries represents the self and the sun also represents the self. It represents our sense of purpose and identity. And when that's healthy, no big deal. We're not craving attention. We're not striving to be better than anyone else. When it's not so healthy, there can be this tendency to not be very direct. And the sun in Libra is known for that, not being very direct. It'll be like, oh, I don't mind. What do you want? Or God help anybody with friends with Sun in Libra to go out to a restaurant. You spend hours looking at the menu. I don't know what to have. I don't know what I want. And that's because it's always trying to assess what the other person might like, or what, in this case, if we generalize, what society might like, as opposed to what I might like. And so it slows down the potential for just asserting oneself. Now, this is the lesson of the sun in Libra, is to find balance, to find harmony. And often what can happen is that the individual is sacrificed in the process. It's not the meaning of the sun in Libra. We don't want that to happen. We want the individual to shine. That's the sun shining in your own unique way. So again, it depends on a natal chart. It would be, we'd have to look at that case by case. But in a generalized sense, we're talking about the archetypes here. Neither the sun nor Mars are really giving us their all, giving us their best. Now, this is always the case, by the way, at the time of a full moon, unless the sun is in its good dignity and the moon is in its fall. So it works one way or another. We're always going to get one planet that's not quite in harmony. And so there's always an adjustment that's required. On a personal level, that adjustment might be needing to adjust to something that we are dealing with other people, in this case, particularly because of Libra. Now, I'll point out as we go sign by sign, we'll look at where Libra is showing up for everybody. It's very important because that's the Libra, we're in the Libra month. And so this is something very important, whereas the moon is more fleeting. But we also want to look at where the Aries in energy is shining for everybody, because that's where the North Node is. And it's really, it's outstanding for the next year, almost a year and a half. So this Mars on the South Node, or what we also call Ketu, is quite dynamic, we could say. It can be very disruptive. It can be very it can cause a certain eruption or a flashpoint that can be in terms of our relationships, or in terms of what is fair, what is just. We see this in opposition again to Eris. Eris is very tightly conjunct the North Node, or Rahu, at this time, 1 arc minute of a degree. That's an incredibly tight conjunction. Now, Eris is conjunct the North Node for weeks and weeks and weeks. So this has already been the case for the last month and a couple of weeks, maybe a month and a half, and it will continue to be the case all through this eclipse cycle. It's just that the conjunction waxes and wanes a wee bit. So let's consider that Eris and the North Node are conjunct for quite some time, and now they're being provoked by the ruler of that North Node, Mars, which is coming up to an exact conjunction within 2 or 3 days of this full moon. So that's another thing that's building over the weekend. It's not just the fact that the moon lingers in Aries, because the moon will then also, by the time it gets to Chiron and Eris and the North Node, the moon will be in opposition to that Mars. So it can be pretty tense. Great weekend to do sports, great weekend for sex, for those of you especially who are positively affected by this. Great weekend for initiating energy for something that you want to try out or that you want to clarify, but not a great weekend for harmony. It's a bit tricky. It's a good time to contemplate what your personal needs are, what your individual needs are, because that's anyway the message of this North Node. Now, we also have Venus in a trine to the node, and well, actually, she's trining this conjunction here of the node, Eris, and Chiron. That's a 4-degree trine with Chiron still relevant. So sextiling Mars and trining the North Node. I'll use that as a shorthand. She's also squaring, very tightly squaring Uranus. And when the moon, of course, joins then these 3 planets and points, we're going to then see the moon trining Venus. So there is something here about what Venus has been trying to explain, highlight, show, teach us since the summer. Now, that would have been particularly active in the middle of July, let's call it the second half of July, with regards to Venus. So you can have a look. I have a video pointing out the Venus in Leo for everybody. So if you're not clear what that was about, you can go back to that. I also have a video about the nodes entering the Aries and Libra axis. So you can have a look at that too. I go sign by sign. And then, of course, I'm going to go eclipse by eclipse, and we're going to have a look at that shortly. In a couple of days, I'll upload that video. So this is quite a stimulating energy here. Venus squaring Uranus can show us where we're really needing, because keeping in mind, Venus rules the Sun, Mars, and South Node in Libra. So Venus is very important here. And she's trining the node, and then eventually the moon when it slides into that conjunction there, that triple conjunction, and she's squaring Uranus. So there's a lot here that is requiring some adjustment that might have us changing our mind about things. Now, here's the thing about Mars opposing Eris, Mars on the South Node, Moon in Aries, is that we can tend to jump to conclusions. We're still dealing with, I'm going to call that still a trine. This is a broad trine, about 6 degrees or so. It's still a trine, Uranus and Pluto. And Uranus is in a trine to Mercury. So we're changing our mind, or we're reacting perhaps too quickly based on things that we believe are true but may not be. And here we come to our beloved Neptune in Pisces at 20, I'm going to call it 26 degrees. It's 2559 of Pisces, which is opposing that Mercury, which means that we're not really seeing things clearly. Neptune is in a sextile to Uranus, and Neptune is semi-sextiling the North Node and Eris in conjunct Mars and the South Node, and still in that sextile to Pluto, which is decades in the making. So for me, this repeats the theme that we are having, which is basically the overall theme here of the Pluto sextile Neptune, which has especially been strong since Neptune entered Pisces in 2011, which is of propaganda, manipulation, not being clear of what we're being told, what is really going on beneath the surface, things not being entirely obvious. And when Neptune is opposing Mercury, in the best case scenario, we get some really fantastic creative impulses, beautiful inspirational ideas, which also can feed into, because it's a very strong Mercury in exaltation and its rulership, can feed into some really great solutions, which is what we're hoping for with this Venus sextiling Mars, some great solutions to any tension or conflicts that we're having, or self-doubts that we're having. It's like Chiron is still there in Aries, trining that Venus. So all of this potential, the jumping to conclusions energy, we can see more likely on the level of the collective. We do see that. It's also worth pointing out, if we have the South Node here on Mars, South Node in Libra, not only on an individual level that represents how we connect in relationships, it's what we're doing perhaps to over accommodate, to what we need to stop doing that is creating some kind of imbalance or disharmony or dysfunction in the sign of Libra, wherever the house where we find Libra is in our charts. We'll get more information about that, to watch that sign by sign. But also, generally speaking, it's about justice. It's about our human justice. So Jupiter is like our spiritual ideals of justice. And Libra is about the human justice. Now, Mars in Libra is fighting for justice, not really able to accomplish its goal, because Mars is there on the South Node. Now, the South Node is considered to be a weakening effect, or an effect that, again, perverts the course of the planet, the energy of the planet, which is already not very strong. Mars is ruling the opposing North Node. So what it really wants is to get things going, to do something, to jump in, to figure this out and go really, really quickly, go into something new. Aries is about something pioneering and new. But there's so many indicators here that we're not seeing things clearly. We don't have all the information. And it's really important to think, in the last years, especially since Neptune entered Pisces, there has been enormous attack on the notion of innocent until proven guilty. Now we have big issues that are going on in the last couple of years since 2020 that have come up in a really, really powerful way. I attribute that in part to the Aries square Pluto, which is still active, weakening but active. It'll be out of range by January, but still, it's been very impactful since 2020. So that's, I think, part of the story culturally. What we're going through is a delusion, propaganda, a sense of confusion, a disjointedness, a feeling of not being able to understand clearly what is going on. And so we react viscerally. And here we see that North Node in Aries, that is really a visceral reaction. Moon in Aries reacts viscerally, not too interested in harmony or the facts. It's what do I want right now? Often having to backpedal after choices, after decisions being made. This is especially true for individuals, but the moon represents the public in general. There is a sense of what an individual wants, not being in harmony with what the collective wants, or what you might describe as the rulership wants. Sun always represents the ruler. In this particular case, it's magnified by that South Node and Mars conjunction squaring Pluto. So just to say, we really need to remind ourselves individually and help each other remember that we don't always know, and that if the tables were turned and we were in a situation where we were being blamed or judged or called out for something, that we would like everybody to know the truth and all the facts before we feel we could find justice. We would like to believe in justice. Now, South Node in Libra is pulling in the opposite direction. Not sure about this belief in justice. Mars on the South Node can be very explosive. It can be mob justice rather than actual justice. Venus, again, is sextiling that Mars, so we can hope for the best. Venus is ruled by the Sun in Libra, so she's not also got a particularly strong ruler, except that they're in a mutual reception, not by degree, but by sign, which does support that notion of justice. But the witch hunt is here. It's this North Node Aries, this anger, this resentment, this feeling of not being acknowledged, this feeling of wanting blood, this feeling of wanting vindication, wanting ask questions later, act now, ask questions later, and then think, oh, okay. I remember visiting Edinburgh. There's at Edinburgh Castle, there's a restaurant, amazing restaurant called The Witchery. And it's called The Witchery because in the medieval days of burning witches at the stake, they had a creative way of dealing with witches, or so-called witches, which is that they would put suspected witches into a barrel which had spikes driven into it facing inwards, and they would roll the barrel off the hill. And if the individual survived, then they were a witch. And so if they didn't, well, that's a pity. So we're in this kind of, witch hunt. It just happens to be, trial by social media, trial by mainstream media. So slow your roll and question, am I in a good position to know the truth? With this Neptune here, I'd say we're really not in a great position to know the truth. There's so many factors that Neptune is clouding our judgment. And it's not really helping, not helpful at all. So anyway, let's have a look sign by sign. Let me check my notes in case there's something I forgot. Yeah, just to underscore that Aries as a symbol, the symbolic Aries, the tradition of Aries is a spiritual warrior, fighting for the righteous cause. Not about selfishness or self-centeredness. That's a lower energy of the sign, can be very self-centered. Again, that is where we find the ego not necessarily feeling strong about itself. This is again is why the sun is exalted in Aries, because the sun knows who it is, doesn't have to prove anything. The moon is the emotions and the mind, and so that impulsiveness, this kind of act before really being informed, leap before you look kind of energy is very strong potentially right now. But the word integrity comes in terms of the actions. So acting on integrity coming from the sun in Libra, ruled by that Venus in Leo, which is dignified, which is about dignity, personal dignity, in a sextile to that Mars, which is ruling all of this Aries stuff. If we slow things down and say, what is real, what is important, what is true right now, whether that be in your life, in your individual life, or in our bigger experience, our social experience, our generational experience of life, it is always always better to do the right thing. A very small percentage of the population will do the right thing. But it's, we'll call it better karma than joining the mob. So there we are. I want to just pull it forward a little bit so we can start with Aries. Right. So, of course, Aries, this is your full moon. We tend to get one a year, sometimes two. This time, I think you're only getting one. Ignore now the actual degree points of the moon because it's been shifted just out of laziness. I'm just moving it along. And so here, of course, you still have Chiron in your first house. Of course, you've had Eris there. Anyone who's sort of 80 years old or so has had Eris in Aries. So that's not new. And of course, the North Node since July has been in your first house. So there's a lot of churning in you with regards to what you need, how you'd like to show up, what is important for you. And of course, you've got Mars in the house of relationship, and it's been there for about 3 weeks already. So that's not always comfortable, not always easy. It can cause some rifts in relationships. It can cause some serious need for adjustment. It can be that the people around you are acting impulsively or acting in such a way that you have to respond to that. And again, this will depend on an individual's chart. I can't, it's not very easy to generalize in that way. But with the South Node going through the seventh house, you're definitely looking at a new way of being in relationship. And so this is, of course, for sun, moon, and rising. If you are born around the time of this full moon, so 29th of September, let's say if you're born from the 27th through till the 2nd of October, no, what'll it be? 1st of October. This is particularly compelling for you, for the sun in Aries. Rising or moon sign, this also applies, of course. The rising sign shows you more specifically where things are happening. But so you're going through quite a lot here of big individual change, moment of, a moment meaning a year and a half of real individual growth. And with Chiron on the first, since May of 2018, you will have had quite a lot of opportunities to overcome any sense of self-doubt, self-worth, childhood wounding around your self-image. And so that applies for sun, moon, or rising. Venus, which is ruling that sun and the South Node, and Mars in your seventh, is in your fifth house. So this could very specifically involve relationships that are very important for you. Could be business partners, could be children as well, could be issues around your creativity. But it seems to be something that can bring you some positive results, some positive support. This is Venus has been trining you since June, since the 5th of June. You've had a lovely trine from Venus to your first house. And that's a sextile to your seventh house. So it looks like an opportunity to resolve things that may have been prickly up until this point. I would just suggest that if you do have issues in relationship, that you might want to write things down and take some time before sitting down face to face with people if there is some kind of burning issue that you want to resolve. Particularly so if these are people that you work with. So you've got Mercury also in the sixth house, so there's something maybe coming up around work. And your income or values. Mercury is trining Uranus in the second house, which is showing some kind of need for new thinking, new way of reacting or being with people in your everyday life. This could also involve family, but I suspect it's much more to do with work and important relationships. The seventh house can be business and client relationships as well. Jupiter, of course, is supporting you in the house of money, where Uranus has been kind of throwing things a little bit up in the air over the last 5 or so years. So this might be a welcome change for you. So Venus is ruling that Uranus that she's very strongly squaring right now. So something is changing here. Something requires a change. And it looks like it's in the way that you relate to people. Again, I'd have to see your natal chart to see how all of this resonates, but slow your roll, Aries. Hard to do in the heat of the moment, but you won't regret it because it's much more difficult to backtrack than it is to go forward the way you mean to continue. So good luck with all of that, and I'll see you in the next video. So Taurus, this is happening, the full moon in Aries is happening in your 12th house. And this is where we have the North Node for a very long time now, up until the 25th of, sorry, up until January of 2025. So you've got a lot of busyness going on behind the scenes for you. This can be with regards to your unconscious, to your sense of ancestral connections, to foreign lands, people from faraway places, or issues around confinement. Now, since we've got Moon, Chiron, North Node, and Eris conjunct there might be issues of health coming up, mental health or otherwise, that can be yours, or it can be something that you need to tend to, because we've got Mars here in the 6th, requiring some kind of action from the house of health. It's the house also that is your daily routine. Sun is there for a month. And so basically from the time that the sun moves into the 6th house, there's quite a lot of emphasis on your day-to-day lifestyle and work, your health, your colleagues or employees, depending on the way you work. If you're still working, if you're not working, it still applies to your schedule, your day-to-day health, and so on. Now, the 6th house is where we find challenges. So it's actually great to have Mars there. It's always good to have the harsher planets, the strong planets in the 6th house, because it can highlight things, can provoke things, especially, for example, inflammation. Mars in the 6th can provoke inflammation. Again, depends on you. But it's very good for having a certain wherewithal or a certain drive to resolve things. Now, your ruler Venus is in the 4th, so there can be something psychological coming up here because we've got the 12th and 6th axis. There might be some issues that you've been working through since June while Venus was there. It can also be things around family, around your connections to family, and it can be about property as well. Venus in the 4th can be a lovely opportunity to really understand, and this is a long period of time, it's 4 months now that we've got Venus there, your ruler. So even more important for you, Taurus, then you have this opportunity to really try and understand your needs psychologically or materially, or just what do I need to be happy. It can be issues around house and home, property, buying and selling property. So if you are dealing with property, for example, the sun in the 6th is all that 6th house is contracts, and dealing with contracts, dealing with the drudgery of the day-to-day stuff. And so maybe because of that connection with Venus in the 4th, there is something here about renting or buying property or having to move in a way that seems to work for you, or that will require at least some effort, but not necessarily in a difficult way. There is this very supportive sextile there with Venus and Mars. So that does say that there is something helpful coming along in that area. Of course, you still have Jupiter in the 1st house. Uranus is there, stirring things up in your life for sure. And this can have you looking at things in a different way. Uranus is squaring that Venus, so that might be that you're changing, you have changed, you have decided something new and different has to come into your life with Jupiter there since May, something of a new vision for yourself. And therefore, where we find Venus is now it's in application, where it's pulling in, what do I need in the foundation of my life? How do I need to feel? How do I want to feel to be happy, to be secure? Or to reconnect with family, for example. I would have to see your natal chart to be able to really describe much more than that, but it looks like a potential for some real resolution if you do have issues going in terms of health. So take action. Mars needs action. You need to take action, and allow yourself to heal. So the Chiron in the 12th can be a very powerful way of healing. There can be a sense of no longer having your place, especially Chiron in Aries in the 12th, feeling of not really finding your place or not really being sure of your place. But that comes down to finding who am I now, and that's what Jupiter's helping you with. So, so all the best with this, Taurus, and I'll see you in the next video. So Gemini, this is happening in your 11th house of social groups. So the full moon will be highlighting the friends that you have and the groups and associations that you work with. It can be issues around income and the money that you earn from what you do. North Node going through the 11th can bring new things into that house. It also is about your future, everything that you find important and where you want to go. So this can be driven by a fear or a concern around lack or inadequacy. That can be something that is still under resolution, let's say. With the North Node and Aries there over several weeks, there might be a feeling of a bit of a chip on the shoulder where there may have been a frustration around friendships or around your goals not being achieved or not feeling achievable. There may be some adjustment required, most likely some adjustment required wherever the North Node goes. It's bringing something new. It's bringing some new ideas that requires you to leave other things behind. And what you're leaving behind is that South Node energy in Libra in the 5th house. So you're leaving behind perhaps some ideas of your own self-expression where you've been creative or where you've needed to be there perhaps for your children. And now it's no longer really that. Now you can pull that energy into the 11th, but there's also potentially a feeling of not quite being ready to let go of what needs to happen around your children or around your idea of who you are and how you express yourself. So Gemini, let's face it, you're all about expressing yourself. And this energy, now we have quite a favorable energy there for you with the sun trining your 1st house. So this applies, of course, if you're Gemini, sun, moon, or rising. I put that in every video and people ask every time, but there we are. I'm just going to reiterate that because it's trining now the sun, which is in your 5th solar house or your 5th house from the ascendant or 5th lunar house for that matter, is really lighting up your sense of how you express yourself, how you create. Mars going through there brings you a lot of drive and energy, but the South Node says it's not any longer what you thought it was. So there's going to be an adjustment required, and the adjustment is based on what your new purpose is, your new sense of your goals. Now, Pluto's going to be changing that radically. You would have already had a taste of that around the time of your birthday in the spring, April, May, June. And Pluto will be moving into your 9th house for about 20 years in 2024. So it's an opportunity for you to really get clear. What are my new goals based on what I personally, that's the Aries energy, what I personally desire and want to achieve, overcoming any feelings of inadequacy in terms of how you show up in the collective. Now, this is perhaps complicated with Saturn in the 10th, where it's been going back and forth since March already. We'll stay there until February 2026. So you've got some time, take your time. And then Neptune in the 10th may have had you feeling a little bit confused around what it is that you want to achieve or the work that you do. That can be something that has been off and on posing some difficulties depending on how Neptune is aspecting your chart. Venus is ruling your 5th house from the 3rd. So this can be very much in terms of your sense of your day-to-day exchanges, whether that be conversational or exchanges in money. That can be about your sibling relationships as well, friends, close friends, people you hang out with every day. That's calling in that 5th house of something's changing there in terms of how you express yourself or how you creatively express yourself. And Venus in the 3rd also brings in that energy for creative expression. So if you are a creative type, if you do work creatively, this is a great time for you. And this can be a super stimulating time to develop and create something new. So good luck with all of that. Whatever comes up for you, Gemini, I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, this is happening in your house of career and your what you could describe as your vocation, your sense of ambition and drive, how society sees you. The 10th house is parents as well, authority figures. Now you've got the moon there, along with the North Node, Aries, and Chiron, which have been there for some time already. So definitely there's a lot coming in for you in terms of your social status and your career ambitions and your goals. If you're not working, it still relates to your role in society and what you might describe as your vocation. It doesn't have to be what you're paid for, except with Jupiter in the 11th, it would be great if you were paid for it because you could actually make some more money. And ignore the degree points here. They're not lining up. So I'm not going to talk about how Jupiter is semi-sextile, the moon is not. So this could be an indicator of what it is that you need to modify or what it is that you need to gear up in terms of how you show up in the world. And in particular, to establish your ambitions out in the world. It's where up until from July 2023 until January 2025, you're really being called to pull yourself out into the world, into society, and show up in the way that you can and need to in your unique way. And the South Node is changing the area of life that you might consider the foundation for your life. That can be emotional, it can be around your connection to people, what makes you feel safe and secure. That can be a physical home. This is also the area of property and home, moving. So I'm a Cancer moon and rising. And so I moved, and I know many Cancers actually who moved, or are literally preparing a move right now. And not to say you have to move. Again, that depends on how it's aspecting your chart, but to just say that there's something changing around your home, around what makes you feel safe. This can also reflect ancestral connections, family, your lineage in general, your country. That's another thing. Again, in my case, I literally changed country. But again, it depends on your chart. This is aspecting my chart quite strongly, so it made sense. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to everybody in the same way. The fourth house represents our psychological or mental needs. And so it looks like there's less of an emphasis, let's say, on what you need to accomplish out in the world rather than what you need to do for yourself. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working on yourself. And again, that'll come uniquely through your chart. But it does mean that more of what you should be doing, indeed, in fact, to feel this sense of security and grounding, is going to be out in the world. And it's often said that the more that we share and the more that we help others, the better we feel about ourselves. So it's just like an indication that that's something that might be true for you too. And Venus is in the second house of values, money, income, family. So whatever you're doing right now, especially with Jupiter in the 11th, which is friends and support from friends, and also your future goals and ideals, it looks like it's being supported. The Venus is in a strong sextile to Mars, and Mars is ruling that North Node with the support of Venus there. So it's looking pretty good all in all. And so, yeah, good luck with all of that. Mercury is in a strong trine. Mercury from the third house, busyness, everyday busy. The fourth house, super busy at home, lots of preoccupations and occupations at home that can also lead to potential tensions. Again, so listen to the intro because that can happen. But also with Mercury in the third, super busy, in a constructive way, because Mercury is exalted, it's in its own sign, it's trining Uranus. So there may be a sense of having to adjust in terms of friends. Mercury represents friends, 11th house is friends. Third house too is friends and neighborhood. Having to adjusting your way of communicating. I have to learn Spanish, for example. And so it looks like there's again quite a lot of change, but in a way that feels supported because Venus is also connecting, although it's a square, but Venus squaring is always more pleasant than the malefics squaring. Venus squaring Uranus is a change of values or a change of ideals or a change of relationships in this case. Again, I would have to see your natal chart to be able to give you more clues around these bigger issues, but an interesting full moon for Cancer. All of the cardinal signs are being very personally affected because, of course, this is a cardinal moon and a cardinal sun. So I didn't mention that in the beginning, but there you are, very personal to the cardinal signs and impactful. So good luck. I'll see you in the next video. So we now have Leo, and this is happening then in the 9th house for Leo. The full moon is in the place of your chart where you feel your sense of purpose. This can be about higher purpose in terms of what am I doing here? What is my life about? Certainly with Chiron there since May-ish of 2018, April, May 2018, that would have come up once or twice, depending on how it's influencing your chart. And with the moon there, it's highlighting something, and that something might be something with regards to what has been going on in the 3rd house of your local community, your communications, your relationships of all kinds. And that's, of course, Libra, where the South Node is moving through. So something's changing there, maybe new relationships or a need for a new way of connecting with people in a very pragmatic way. Mars has been going through there, so that's really, really busy. Mars in the 3rd house, super busy, can be pretty sharp in terms of how you communicate as well. So just be careful of that. There can be this impatience and a sharpness in the way that you sort of show up for people, especially because that moon in Aries in the 9th, moon in the 9th always wants to feel good. It's almost like a desire to feel good all the time or to want things to be great all the time, but it's difficult to, in this human form, to feel great all the time. We want to accept that things are not always going to feel great. And with the Venus going through the first, this might be something that you're projecting onto other people. So if you're not feeling great, you might project that onto the people in your life or a situation like a circumstance or a sibling or, people around you, or an obligation. 3rd house can be obligations as well. And so just remember that things are not always meant to be easy and comfortable, alas. And so it's a good idea to, again, just check in and say, am I really seeing this clearly? You have quite a lot of grace with Venus in your 1st house and Jupiter in your 10th. So it's probably not that bad, but just as a word of caution. Again, that depends on your natal chart. So beware of projection. Leo is a fixed sign, and often with the fixed signs, there can be a tendency to jump to conclusions. And this is one of the other things with Eris on the North Node. Jumping to conclusions is a big potential. Again, this is going to depend on your individual charts. Right. What else have we got to say? Yeah. So the 3rd house is very big for you for the next month. Very important. And Mars will continue to be there well into October. I think it's till the 12th of October. And so any prickliness or agitation, just slow. Venus will move into your 2nd house. That can also be very good for income, can be very good for your sense of well-being, physically as well as socially. And so make the most of that because, of course, Venus rules your 10th. So you might be investing or doing something more come October. That is what you're realizing you need to do to create this thing that you're looking towards in terms of what it is that you're here for. So again, I'd have to see your natal chart to be able to be more descriptive, but that's what we've got for Leos right now, Sun, Moon, and Rising. So see you in the next video. So Virgo, we have this happening in your eighth house. So the full moon in the eighth is often an opportunity to realize what's been going on in terms of your intimate relationships or in terms of your finances as well. Now the North Node is there for you, so that's really a big theme for you, shared resources, how you get money from other people, new ways of connecting with people, new ways of being intimate with people. And there's a realization around this that's coming up in terms of the eighth house. Now, the second house is where we find the Mars and South Node conjunction, and that second house is where you would find your money, your income, and so on. So it's not super easy right now for Virgo rising in particular, because you've got Venus in the 12th, which can also indicate loss. So Venus in the 12th can be either hidden resources or loss, or something not really being working out for you. I think you'll find it easier when Venus actually moves into your first house as of the 8th of October, then things will start to roll for you. So don't despair if money is all weird right now. Second house has you working hard, you're striving for money, but it can also be that it's coming from a place of something that's in the process of changing in a big way in terms of your values or in terms of what you feel your worth is. It's a bit confused for you around money. Second and eighth axis is not always very easy to deal with, especially with Venus in the 12th ruling that second. So take it slow. Your ruler's in the first house, so really good for good judgment, for being able to see clearly what you want, being able to clearly describe what you want. Although Neptune is still in opposition, or let's say once again in opposition from your seventh, so you may not be seeing opportunities that clearly, or you may not be seeing individuals clearly. So don't get sucked into other people's drama. Don't get sucked into needing to care for other people at your own expense, which is a kind of a classic Virgo rising thing, and especially more so when you've got Neptune in the seventh. So make the most of this opportunity to realize something new coming in, or realize something about this eighth house, which can also, by the way, be issues around family karma, family emotional trauma potentially as well, especially because that Mars South Node is moving through the house of family with the sun. All right, I'll leave it there. I'd need to see your chart to be able to be more clear, and I'll see you in the next video. So Libra, you've got this happening in your relationship sector. So it's something highlighting what is coming up for you in relationship. This is quite substantial. In fact, I want to just change back to my original chart, which will give us the actual, wait, sorry about that. I want to go back here. I want to just take this chart because it'll give us a better look at the moon. And so you have this happening in your relationship sector for these Libra, Sun, Moon, or Rising. So definitely something is new. This can be new relationships coming in, or a new way of being in relationship. And often with Libra rising, it's difficult to feel, and again, that depends on your natal chart, but it can be difficult to feel seen or honored. There can be a lot of compromise around relationships, potentially a lot of frustration, especially with Mars there. It's kind of, there's maybe a need for you to stand up for yourself, a need for you to project some of your self-assertion, your needs and desires into your relationship. And so you're noticing something here about what's going on in relationship with other people, what you desire in relationship. Now, seventh house is also very strongly connected to work, to professional relationships, to your business partners, for example, as well as your good friends, life partners, people who support you in all ways. Venus is in the 11th, which is lovely. And that Venus is bringing you friends and new opportunities through friends. since June, since the 5th of June, and it'll stay there until the 8th of October, and that's your ruler. So we always, for Libra, you always want to check on Venus, what she's doing. And so Venus is supporting that Mars in the first house. There's a really good dynamic there through a sextile to Mars, pulling in friends, perhaps pulling in your future hopes and desires that you've been working on, working towards, perhaps with the help of friends in your 11th house. That can also be about income, for example. And of course, Venus is supporting the sun. If you are born around this time, around the 29th of September, give or take 2 or 3 days, this will be very impactful for you personally because your sun will be around there and that will be in opposition to the moon. Or if your rising sign or moon is around 6 degrees, give or take 2 or 3 degrees, this will also be very impactful. So a good opportunity to clarify things in relationship, especially as Jupiter is going through the 8th and Uranus going through the 8th can be disruptive in the house of other people's resources or the house of intimacy, not always seen entirely clearly. Well, both of them are retrograde. There's more awareness, more clarity for you, but it's internalizing until they go direct. You'll be able to then find your way forward once again. So good luck with that, Libra, and I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is happening in your 6th house of everyday work. It suggests that there's something that you're dealing with in terms of either your health or so much like Taurus, this is the health axis. The 6th and 12th house are the health axis, the axis of mental and psychological as well as physical health. And so there can be something showing up here that requires your attention, that you're becoming aware of. With Chiron having gone there through there already for about 5 years, it wouldn't be probably something entirely new. You may have been alerted to that. At least you should be paying attention. If you haven't been paying attention, do pay attention to any health issues that come up for you. And with the moon there in the 6th, it can also be that there's something that you need to take care of, stuff that needs to be dealt with. It's like everyday stuff. It's the challenges. It can be contracts. It can be, the day-to-day schlepping around and the work and the difficulties that might come up in terms of employee or colleague relationships, for example. Where Mars in the 12th on the South Node might be difficult for you to realize what's actually bugging you, where things might be irritating you, or things might be happening behind the scenes in a way that you're not really clear about. 12th house is hidden enemies, and Mars in its fall, it's not, sorry, in its detriment is potentially going to show you, or you're going to sense that there's been some things happening that you have not been really clear about that may have to do with work. Venus is there pulling that energy into the 10th house, for example, and you're just realizing now where things need to be dealt with. Mars on the South Node will have you deal with them. Something in the way that you're showing up needs to change, or the way that you're allowing things to happen may need to change. This can also be you undermining yourself, because Mars is your ruler. So Mars rules your chart, whether you're if you're the ascendant in Scorpio, it's ruling your sun or your moon, with the moon or sun in Scorpio. So Mars is very important for Scorpio. So you might be the thing causing all the difficulties. So stop it. If you're the one that might be sabotaging yourself, or causing some challenges and enervations in terms of your mental peace, Mars in the 12th can be disruptions around your unconscious or around your sleep even. On the good side, can also represent travel to distant places or people working from afar. but Mars on the South Node requires some delicate handling, especially as it's your ruler. Mars will move into your first house on the 12th of October. And that will be a lot more comfortable because then you can be your usual, more invigorated, direct self. Yeah, I think that's, and then of course you've got Jupiter in the seventh. So there is something going on, something changing in relationships, something very dynamic happening in your relationships overall, where I think it's generally speaking quite positive. But it can, depending on your natal chart and depending on how things are working out individually for you, it can provoke splits, it can provoke challenges in relationships, especially important business partnerships or important intimate relationships. Right, I'm going to leave it at that, Scorpio. I need to see your natal chart. Make the most of that Venus in the 10th while she's there, because this will be the thing that allows you to elevate whatever the situation is that you're dealing with here for the next couple of weeks while Venus is still there. And Venus going through the 11th is also equally lovely. So you've got a actually kind of 6 or 8 weeks where you can really use Venus to your advantage. So make the most of that benefic in your 10th house. So I'll see you next time, Scorpio. Sagittarius, this is in your 5th house. So that's a trine to you. The full moon is trining your 1st house. That's very, very helpful. It's trining Venus as well, which is a benefic in the 9th house, which is equally helpful. And she is in a sextile to all of this energy in your 11th house of hopes and dreams. So it's quite good overall for Sagittarius, can be very dynamic. Now, with the moon in Aries, Sag, you're already the type of energy, that fire energy, which is impulsive and spontaneous. So with the moon in Aries, that can be good or bad. Again, it depends on you and your nature. But it's definitely an opportunity for you to start something new or to become aware of something with regards to your creative impulses. You're being asked to show up differently in your creative expression, your self-expression. That's the 5th house is your house of hobbies, children, sports, all creative things. So anything that you generate from yourself, and that can be your own babies, for example, can be in terms of businesses. It's an entrepreneurial energy in the 5th house as well. And especially with Mars in the 11th, there's a lot of drive. There's a drive to finding new goals. Mars on the South Node suggests that your goals are no longer what you wanted. Things are changing. That whatever the goals were, it's not really that anymore. Now you're looking at things in a new way. And the focus is much more on you and your creative process, and less on the bigger picture of the future, or less on groups and friends and so on. Mars in the 11th house either can make you a bit bossy with groups and kind of trying to take over, or it can cause challenge and division with groups, especially with the South Node there. There can be some things that make you feel like now it's time to move on. It's just time to get on with it and do something different. So Venus in the 9th actually is very supportive nonetheless. So a really lovely aspect to have at the same time, because that supports the your sense of purpose and your sense of high-mindedness that can pull into that 11th house as well. Mercury is very strong in your 10th, so things going around work, for example, or your personal ambitions can work really well, potentially. And so that's in a very strong trine to Uranus, a weaker trine to Jupiter in the 6th. So there's something changing that might be unpredictable. That's kind of beyond your control, but it seems like with Mercury in the 10th, you seem to have a grip on things. So again, I will have to see an individual chart so I can be more clear, but that just gives you an idea, at least for the moon in the full moon in Aries. I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, this is, of course, your cardinal sign, so this is very important for you. It's happening in an angular house for you in the house of home. and family and your sense of your um, psychological foundation or your material foundation for life, what makes you feel secure, which for Capricorn is always very important. Your ruler is moving through the third house. So Saturn rules your chart, moving through the third house. And so it suggests that there's a big area of focus for you in terms of your local community, your the way that you present things, the way that you think about things, the way that you communicate them, siblings potentially also. And that might be what you're realizing here in terms of what it is that's changing for you in your foundation. Now, Chiron has been there for a while, so 5 years or so. So there's something that's kind of rocking your world, aside from this Pluto that's been in your first house for 15 years, rocking your world indeed. But the Chiron in the fourth has also showed where there's some maybe healing around family. That can be your family, the one that you've created, or it can be your family lineage that you're working through healing. North Node going through there is going to pull in a lot of energy between now and the early 2025, where more of your attention should become focused on what you need to feel secure, what your family might need, your emotional needs, what makes you happy, rather than the usual Capricorn energy of ambition and career and drive. Now, again, that depends on your chart. That's just the archetype of Capricorn. But the outer directed stuff, connecting with the outer world, ambition, and so on, is changing for you. So Mars in the 10th is this is a bit paradoxical because Mars in the 10th is very ambitious, very driven, and yet it's on the South Node, which drains it of all that energy. And Mars is in Libra, where it's not really effective. And so there may be a bit of frustration. And that frustration around what's going on in terms of your career might actually be the thing that's pulling in all of this energy into your awareness in the fourth house. Now you become more aware of what you realize you need in terms of your inner experience of life, your unconscious or deep, which might describe deep security, deep emotional or psychological security. Now, especially because Venus is in the eighth house, this can be supported by intimate relationships or an awareness or an understanding of the unconscious process that can be around sexuality as well. So that again depends on your natal chart, but that can be very positive for you. Experiences of intimacy don't always have to be sexual. They can also be purely, psychological or emotional intimacy. And yeah, and that Venus is ruling the Sun and Mars South Node in your 10th. So there may be something that comes up in terms of investments or what you've understood around connections and deals and contracts with other people that is kind of done. Like the Venus is sextiling Mars. You're done with it, maybe. You're done. Or the thing is done, and it's kind of reached its conclusion, and then that Mars on the South Node will be the thing that just says, okay, moving right along. Again, I'd have to see your natal chart. So you do have Jupiter in your fifth house, which is quite fun. It's trining you in the first, and it's trining your ninth house. Uranus too is causing a feeling of perhaps being unsettled or change, desire for change in terms of how you express your creativity, express yourself. But that can be very, very healing for you, Capricorn, because often self-expression is not so easy for Capricorn. Often there's such a feeling of duty and obligation that you don't really let yourself just kind of hang loose. And there, that Venus coming from the 8th to the 5th. This may be about gambling. Maybe it's time to go to Vegas, and you just don't talk about it because Venus is in the 8th. So there we are. I'm going to leave it at that, Capricorn, and I'll see you in the next video. And so we have for Aquarius rising, we have a third house full moon. So lots going on in terms of the an everyday experience, your neighborhood, your neighbors, your friends, your busyness, your awareness of how you connect with people locally, how you express yourself as well. That's where the North Node will be for Aquarius for a year and a half until January 2025. So your ruler Saturn is in the second. So that has been taking a look at your values or your income and changing that for you, or highlighting that for you, making you feel perhaps a need to upgrade or transform. Um, with the moon in the third house, this might be about business if you are in business. And especially with the sun in the ninth and Mars south node in the ninth, there can be some new notions around what you do expect for yourself, or what you want to do with your life, your sense of purpose. Now, this can be really inspired because sun in the ninth is really powerful. Even if it's not in great dignity, it's still where the sun finds its joy. Moon finds its joy in the third. So this actually works out really nicely for Uranus, sorry, for Aquarius, where you find where, yeah, you might be finding some new sense of what needs to show up for you every day, and that's going to contribute to what you understand about this North Node going through the third. You are definitely feeling and vibrating in a different way. Uranus, your modern ruler, is in the fourth with Jupiter. And that's bringing in a lot of energy to your fourth house of home and family, or your sense of security and emotional needs. But that can be really supportive. It's very grounding having Taurus there with Jupiter in Taurus. That helps to stabilize that rather ungrounded energy of Uranus that's been there since 2018. Venus is in the house of relationship, and she's ruling that Sun, Mars, and South Node in the ninth. So that looks like you can find some real support. She's in a mutual reception also with that Sun in the ninth, and so you can find some support going through that, whatever the new thing is for you, coming from friends or from business partnerships or from lovers and life partners. All very helpful. Having Venus in the seventh, great opportunities coming from people that you're connecting with, whether it be personally or professionally. Yeah, because yeah, it looks quite supportive. Venus rules the fourth as well as the ninth, and so this looks quite supportive in terms of your sense of what you need to. Maybe you need to grow more reliant on certain people. Um, I would have to see your chart, but that's another thing with Aquarius. We have a tendency to kind of isolate and want to go it alone. And maybe Venus there for the last 4 months in the seventh has been asking you to reach out a little bit more. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I hope all goes well for you. It looks like in any case, this is uh, something of a whole new horizon for you. This is, of course, the ninth house where the eclipse is going to be happening on the 14th as well. So new horizons for Aquarius, just in time for Pluto to enter your first house. Good luck with all of that. So here we have Pisces, and Pisces, this is happening in your second house of income. So there's something you're realizing about your money situation. With the North Node going into the second for Pisces, you're going to have to take more responsibility for your income. It's a personal, you're taking responsibility both for the money that you earn, how you invest it, but also all sense of your self-worth and your worthiness. A lot of the next 18 months is going to be really focused on that. A little bit less than 18 months because it started in July, but this moon is highlighting something about that. Are you operating in such a way that your income is healthy and stable? Saturn going through the first house, your first house, if it's your rising, otherwise it's your solar or lunar first house. is trying to restructure you, make you a bit more solid, serious, grounded. And so this can be an opportunity for you to reflect on that. Now, your ruler Jupiter is in the third house, and Venus is in your sixth. And so this definitely calls in your everyday habits, and Venus has been in your sixth house of everyday habits, health, work colleagues, and so on, where there's been quite a lot of busyness since the beginning of June. And Venus is ruling this Jupiter in the third, which is making you also very busy since middle of May. So it's probably been quite a hectic time. And also your everyday kind of experience has been really shifting a lot. Your goals may have been shifting a lot too over the last 5 years, because Uranus has been going through there a need to learn new skills, a need to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, a need to perhaps revise your values, Uranus in Taurus, new ways of connecting with siblings as well. The third house is your neighbors as well, your friends that you see, that you hang out with. So lots of change coming in that area of life for Pisces. Now the Sun and Mars and the South Node are in the eighth house. And so there's something here in the eighth where there may be a letting go of financial support or some kind of understanding of what needs to be adapted in terms of your finances, or potentially around intimacy as well. So Venus in the sixth house of everyday kind of getting real, getting grounded, dealing with stuff every day is ruling all of this. In the eighth house, that can also be around your mental state, your unconscious issues that are not necessarily clear even to you, things that may not be. Now that wouldn't be unusual for Pisces. I can say that because I have a Pisces stellium. But that the issues that are not very clear are clarifying, because now we have this understanding there's something going on here in the connection between the eighth and the second, something about values, about intimacy, about money, about resources, where do they come from. Mars in the eighth usually is about shedding, and certainly the South Node there. It's now you're moving into a new way of collecting or figuring out how to deal with your own resources and become a resource unto yourself, Pisces. That's a way of looking at that. But this is all trined by Venus. So very helpful in that sense from the sixth house. So you've got this. Venus is exalted in Pisces, so does really well for Pisces. You've got this. This is all about change. It's all about highlighting something new and different coming in. Now, relationships also look to be supportive, because you've got a very strong Mercury there in your house of relationships. Are you clear about that, though, is the question. So you've got Neptune opposing that Mercury. So slow it down. With the moon in Aries, we all need to slow down. We all need to take a breath, not necessarily act, or especially not react, let's say over the next couple of days. So give yourself the weekend off. And as of Monday, you might understand things more clearly when the moon goes into the third, where it will be in its joy, and in Taurus, where it's exalted, and much, much better for you, Pisces. So I will see you in the next video, and I wish you all a wonderful full moon in Aries. Bye.